What's been a piece or two of the most difficult feedback you've received as a leader? The kind that sort of takes your breath away a little bit and sets you back.
Yeah. I remember I was younger at the time, but someone told me I was arrogant. And of course, that's a pretty harsh term.
That's right.
And so the response is, okay, why do you think I'm arrogant? And whether it's valid or not, part of the feedback that they gave me was, well, sometimes you're in your room, you don't talk to people, particularly peers and whatnot. And the reality is I'm very introverted. And when I go into a social, like a cocktail party kind of thing, I'm very uncomfortable.
Right.
And so my defense mechanism is not to walk around and be a back slapper and handshaker. I'm just not as comfortable doing that. And that can be perceived differently than I think the reality. I've learned, and we all have coping mechanisms, as you get older, those basic traits don't change. You don't become less introverted. What you do is you become more able to develop coping skills to overcome it. So I learned, particularly with junior people, I would go down and I would work it because I owed them that effort. Whether it's uncomfortable for me or not, I owe them that, because young people won't come up and approach the older person. So the older person has that responsibility. And it was funny, in my mind, as I viewed it as my responsibility, I found it easier to do because I felt it was something I should do.
Interesting. Do you think that being an introvert, the way you're describing, actually helps you ask better questions? I mean, you've caused me to wonder that, because sometimes introverts, they step back enough to see things other people don't see.
I think that's possible. I don't claim that I ask wonderful questions, but I do claim that I do like to ask questions. And one reason is I think introversion, that's a way to get a conversation going. It's hard for me to go, hey, how about them socks? But to ask questions and have somebody give me a window into themselves starts to develop. And an introvert normally does much better in a one-on-one conversation than they will in a group. And so I found that starting to ask questions will establish a rapport that makes it easier to do the conversation. And of course, once you start asking questions and become informed, then it takes you down all kinds of roads, not just relationship building, but also you're really getting insights that you wouldn't get in a very superficial conversation.
I mean, you've been a senior leader, you've worked with a lot of senior leaders. Are there forces operating in their world that makes it difficult for them to do what you just said?
Yeah, there are a number of forces, and we go. The first is time. It's very hard to be on this incredible schedule and sit down and pretend to have a relationship building conversation when it's just a few minutes, or it will never happen again. Some good senior leaders get very good at doing as well as they can in that situation. The second thing is the sensitivity of what you're talking about. In the age of political leaks and social media and whatnot, even conversations in very small groups, if they are genuine, can suddenly be leaked or be shared. And that can undermine. Future conversations are never the same after that has occurred. And so as a consequence, leaders become more guarded. I think there's also just the problem with differences in culture. It's not just differences between Americans and a foreign culture, it's also within our own culture, military and civilian, between intelligence agencies and Department of State. You grow up in these different worlds that become more insular and more tribal as you rise, and you just don't have the comfortable trust that takes time to build. And that can't just be built organizationally. A lot of that's got to be built individually. People, individual to individual. And so particularly when we're moving fast and doing 1,000 things, it's hard to do. And not all of it can be done digitally. You can buttress a relationship with telephone calls and emails and whatnot. But I don't think you really can build the foundation of one that way. I think there's a certain amount of face-to-face interaction that must form the foundation. When I took over as a battalion commander, one of my young officers, my first week in the job, came and said, you know, when the previous commander was here, he had there a desk and then there were 2 chairs and a little coffee table out in front of it. He said whenever we came and talked to him, we'd sit in a chair and he'd stay behind his desk and he'd be looking at his computer, he'd be messing with papers. And he described that to me, didn't say any more. And I got out around my desk, and when everybody came to see me, I'd go sit in one of those 2 chairs, not behind my desk. And so he'd unconsciously give me this incredible advice that I still believe in. If you stay behind your desk, you keep this barrier, and you're tempted to be distracted. So what I try to do is go out around and not put anything in front of myself, because if I have a distraction, I'll look at it. If I keep my computer open, I'll glance over. And so unless it's a conversation that's so easy I can be doing that, I try to take everything away, focus on the person. I also find that if you do that, the person takes the conversation more seriously. You know, if they want part of my time or if I want part of their time and I'm staring at them, typically they will feel like, wow, maybe we shouldn't waste this time.
Which then, the notion of maverick leadership means that we're literally trying to push the status quo in a system. And my guess is that when you've tried to do this in different parts of your career, what we're talking about has probably made a big impact. You can't push military systems with long histories and all kinds of accomplishments without that sort of connection, I suspect.
If you're trying to change a system, they've got to believe that you want to change it and that you can change it. They won't believe, I mean, wanting to change it's not enough. They'll go, that's great. They've got to sense, hey, I think this person's pushing on this. I think it might move. And you, of course, want to enlist them to help push with you. And so I think that's the key thing. If they don't think you're bought in.
So final question. It's you shared with me you're now a grandfather.
I am.
And congratulations on that. And if you think of your grandchild and kids out there in the world who are going to be the next generation of leaders, and you could give them a single gift as they prepare for that future, what might it be?
I think clearly the ability to empathize with people. And I carefully don't say sympathize, because it's easy to have sympathy for all the things. But the ability to deal with someone and to the greatest extent possible, see things from their perspective. You don't have to agree, but you have to have the ability to turn that lens around so that whether you're dealing with someone from another sex or another age or another culture or another religion, you can see it. Because if you operate under the theory that most people are rational, they're doing things for a rational reason. And so when you see behavior that you disagree with or you think is irrational, if you really probe it, you'll typically find causes that really are the seat of what you're trying to deal with. And if we just look at it and we go, that's irrational, that's bad, and we don't have at least the respect for other people that causes us to be empathetic and understand, then we're often solving the wrong problem.